Hello there, Hero Club. This is Wheelchair21, and I'm joined with Soundout12, and we have a special guest with us for an interview today, which is VR Troopers J.B.Reese, Mike Hollander, and thank you for joining us today.
Hey guys, thanks
Hey,
for having me.
yeah, we're glad that you got back to us for this interview, and hope that you'll enjoy your time with us, because we got quite a few questions for your time on VR Troopers, as well as the awesome stuff you've done with animation,
Yeah,
because
yeah, that's my latest game.
IMDb is really useful. That's one of the most useful places
That's
to catch
good.
up on actors. So, I guess the best way to start with this interview is obviously what actually did inspire you to become an actor, and what were the first steps you did to, go into the profession, like your education?
I really wasn't out to pursue acting. I had a martial arts studio back in Massachusetts, which is where I'm from, and my mother when I was about 19 or 20 convinced me to try to get into modeling, and so I
Uh-huh.
did she paid for my first photo session, and I looked at the photos and I thought, oh, this is cool. And they told me how much money I could make doing this. Like, just standing there in front of a camera, I can make this much money. Like, because my school wasn't doing that well, and just the idea of making that ridiculous amount of money for just standing in front of a camera appealed to me. So I did a competition in Los Angeles and got hooked up with a bunch of agents, and one thing led to another. I started getting into doing commercials and print work, um, and then eventually I got a Tony Braxton video, and then got a call while I was on the video shooting. I got a call to do an audition for VR Troopers. That's that's how I let.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
how.
because that
So,
because that was actually one of the questions was actually how did you discover the auditions for VR Troopers? That knocked out our next question
uh,
easily. But what was the actual
yeah.
process like?
What was what process like?
The audition process like? Like what when you
Oh,
went in, how'd they have you like read lines and do all your stunt work and dance work?
yeah, exactly. It was pretty grueling, and I don't think the other two characters or any of the other characters had to do what I had to do. Basically, they were looking for a character like the Black Power Ranger, and so they wanted someone that could break dance and do martial arts and do acting, and um, yeah, just there was a lot more they wanted me to do. So in the audition, they gave me 5 minutes to prepare. They didn't tell me this ahead of time. I had the lines that I was going to read, so I was prepared for that. But they didn't tell me that I had to come up with a dance, gymnastics, and martial arts routine. So they just put me in this empty room, and I had to come up with something, choreograph it real quick, and they were going to film it on camera. And they did, and it went well. And so I got the next audition with the producers. It was probably about 3 auditions altogether with different people.
Yeah, because having been to Paramorphicon on a couple occasions, and my friend Sound out here going to several conventions locally where they bring in other actors from the early Saban shows, we all have heard the horror stories of they tell you you're going to read lines for the show, but then they're like, "Can you dance or do karate?" And they're like, what?"
Right.
And so that was a huge thing because I know in the more recent seasons, one of my friends tried out and he had to come back for three separate callbacks before they finally nixed him from the final
Oh,
uh like 3 or 7 guys they had there.
what did he not have the dance moves? Was the dance?
Uh no, supposedly like they kept doing this thing for my one friend, and it was that first they brought him in and they're like, "Oh, you might be the best for the Red Ranger." Then they're like, "Nah, that doesn't work. We finally figured out who our Red Ranger is. Could you come back and try for the male Yellow?" "Nah, that doesn't work. Could you come back and try out to be the Red Ranger's brother?" And then they were like, "Okay." And then like, "Would you want to be the school bully?" And then he was like there at the final last 2 callbacks, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't want you. We want this preppy looking white guy." And ironically, the actor who became the guy on that show ended up being Ian McGregor's stunt double in Birds of Prey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it blows me away. I've been in the industry for 10 years, and for the life of me, I can't understand how they pick a type because it's not
Mm-hmm.
the acting. Maybe sometimes it is, certainly at the higher level, but at this level for a kid show, I mean, they're just looking for a particular type, and they're trying to get a certain, I guess, diversity in the group and how they look and work with each other. But yeah, I could never figure out what they were looking for. It wasn't martial arts either, because at least on my show, I was of the main cast, I was the only one that actually had extensive martial arts experience. So, and Power Rangers, I think most of them didn't have any martial arts experience, you know, the first season.
Yeah,
So,
because I know that in your show, you were probably one of the more better qualified for martial arts, hearing stories from other actors when having met you guys. And I know that on Mighty Morphin, there were only like 3 people that actually knew martial arts, and the rest knew gymnastics and dance.
right.
Versus that, Sound, you want to take over for question number 4?
Yeah. So as filming started to begin, what did you think, and what did your castmates think about the show going into it? Did you have any assumptions of it was going to be more difficult since Power Rangers was coming in? Did you ever feel like, you know, you were going to be the secondary show to Saban, or did it have like its own tone and feel to make it have a distinctive kind of experience?
No, it felt very much like a Power Ranger spinoff. And we knew that, but we knew that the success of Power Rangers was so strong that we were hoping to ride their coattails into success as well. The only doubts we were having, and I forget about what time period when we found this out, but we weren't going to be marketed the same way as Power Rangers because they were network, and Fox Network didn't want to pick us up. They didn't think that Saban Entertainment could do another hit show like that. I think it was viewed as, oh, it's just a spinoff. It's too much like Power Rangers. It's never going to work. He got lucky with Power Rangers, but he's not going to do it again. So they didn't pick up the show. So we were syndicated and sold separately all over the country. So we didn't have the type of marketing, and we were on different time slots throughout the country. So that was a concern. And also there were things about how they were creating the show to make it feel different than Power Rangers. Some things were good, and some things were like the soundtrack to the opening title theme. It was a different song, and the name VR Troopers was a different name. It was supposed to be Cybertron, and it had this cool like heavy metal soundtrack in the beginning, and then they scratched it and did VR Troopers. We were like, oh, really? Virtual reality troopers? We thought that was corny. And then the song they did with it, we were worried.
Yeah, because I can tell you right now, I remember talking to, I think, you or Mr. Hawkins about how literally the Cybertron song literally just took out Cybertron and Grimlord and was just like, we're just going to turn it to Green Ranger and Goldar and make it the Green Ranger theme when they brought JDF back into Mighty Morphin, and then went off and rewrote the show to feature yourself, Mr. Hawkins, and Sarah Brown as the lead cast of characters. Also, I think they also had to change the name because they knew Hasbro could have sued them due to the fact that the planet Cybertron in the Transformers lore shared the same name as your TV show.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of people didn't realize that at the time, I think, because the pilot was not that well known until years later when, obviously, YouTube became a thing and we saw that and, well, the rap tape that you guys, weren't supposed to do.
Also considering Transformers was, like, dead in the water at the time, too. There was nothing going on with that franchise. So it probably, producers coming along said, oh, Cybertron sounds like a great name. And then the legal team said, okay, you can't use that.
Yeah.
All right.
The other... Oh, sorry. I didn't want to cut you off. My apologies.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Wow. Oh, okay. No, I was wondering, when I was talking to you, you said also, like, there was a lot of a difference in contrast of, like, what JB originally was when you guys started filming, and then what eventually he got turned into. Like, you said, like, they wanted you to be a different type of person, and you said it was hard for you to, like, portray that kind of character, and then they just kind of geared it to be more like you. And also, did you ever actually know what the initials stood for in the name? Because no one knows what J.B.Reese is supposed to fully mean either.
James Bond. Yeah. Just because. No, I don't know. It didn't stand for anything.
Yeah, because a lot of people have been wondering what that was.
Yeah, I think I had the option of doing. They gave me an option of 2 names. It was like something like Kevin Brown or something like that, or JB. And I was like, let's do JB.
And
so it was cool that they gave me that option. But
all right, but what was the thing about like how like the character shifted over to being more like how you actually feel naturally are in real life? Because I remember you said something like that. Like they wanted you to be more, like sort of like, I wouldn't say a copy and paste, but a lot more like Walter Jones's Zach. They said.
Yeah. They even said that in my first audition, and the lines were written that way. Yeah, they wanted me to be more stereotypical street. So, the lines were always, starting with "Yo, what's up?" That was just that whole. However, whoever was writing the show, I won't suggest what or who was writing it or what their backgrounds were, but it just sounded so stereotypical, and it just, I don't know. It was a weird time period in my life at that point. This was a period where the way people of color were being represented changed drastically from the 80s to the 90s. And there was a lot going on back then, and I just was kind of rebelling personally against the stereotype of what Black people should sound and act like. I never, if I agreed that this character needed to play that, I guess I could have pushed for that, but it didn't make sense to play that kind of character, and I just didn't like the idea of playing this stereotype. So I think I just read the lines like myself, and the writers slowly started realizing, that these lines aren't reading the way we're writing them. So they just changed it and started writing naturally.
So pretty much they saw it as like possibly not just being stereotypical, but like too corny in a sense, because it just didn't feel natural anyways, like when they heard it being said.
Yeah, maybe it was my acting. I'll take blame for that. But it didn't feel right. It did feel the writing felt corny, and it felt over the top, kind of stereotypical. And
Yeah, because
I
remember you played a very straight man in the show. Like in the show, like you were very like there would be like all this comedy going around, and like JB would always try to be like the straight man to the funny guy, like that old trope. Because like I remember like you'd always be like a little bit more serious, and like there's Ryan doing something like really like he should like, because there'd be episodes where he's trying to do something like some hijinks to pull a prank on somebody in like a one-off episode, and you're just sitting there going, Ryan, I don't think we should be doing this. He's like, no, this is a good idea, JB. I mean, we can't see this guy stealing away Caitlin from us. And then JB's like, dude, just admit you have a crush on her. And he's just like, nah, man, she's like my sister. And you're just like, oh God, why am I doing this?
I don't remember all that, but
yeah, like I rewatched some of the episodes recently. And I just remember those like these subplots where like, yeah, there's like these ones where Ryan's just like, I secretly have a crush on Caitlin, and here you are going, okay, just say it already. Just stop dragging me along.
Yeah, there were a few episodes where I think the one you're talking about is he got like took
Super
some love
jealous.
potion. Yeah, he took some love potion and fell in love, with Caitlin. And there was another episode where he turned into a dog. So they played up some of the comedy with his character. And then we also had a comic relief with Percy. And my character was supposed to be like the computer nerd. So yeah, I think it was just written that, and I didn't have that many lines. So there weren't many episodes that featured me. So I was just kind of a secondary character most of the time anyway. And since I was the computer nerd, I was doing nerdy stuff.
Yeah, I found it funny because the show that you're based on, your character is obviously a protagonist, but yet when they do like the episodes that are focusing more heavily on the footage that your Tokusatsu character was, they actually moved Caitlin as like the lead for the show, which she was actually the sidekick for that character in the Japanese footage. So it was a really weird mesh that I always noticed that they were like, your kind of just there, and then other episodes you're like actually the main focus, like you're very prominent, and it was like a weird tonal shift. I feel like maybe the three hero context hurt the show rather than helped progress the show at times, because they didn't seem to know how to do the focus for all three of you.
Yeah, and they were also, it was a half-hour show, and half the show was dedicated to the Japanese footage where they cut to action. So yeah, there wasn't much time for character, and each show had a kind of formula where we would all three do something fun together, and then there would be like a segment where it just focused on one of us. And I could be wrong, because I don't remember all the episodes. We shot like 92 episodes, but it seemed like
it was a high number.
Yeah, most of the focus was on Brad, and then I think they had a lot of episodes that focused on Caitlin. There weren't many episodes that focused on my character and my background. Only maybe 2 that I can remember.
Yeah, I only remember at least 2 offhand out of when I did like a quick, like, let me watch these key focal episodes that I remember to give me something, and I'm like, wow, this is really the Brad Hawkins Hiya show.
Yeah.
There was that great episode about a bookmobile, though.
Yeah, that was one of them, yeah. Bookmobile. Oh,
I didn't even know those things were a thing. Like, a friend of mine had to tell me, because I was like 3 when the show was airing, and he was like, yeah, that was a real thing back in the 90s, bookmobiles. Yeah. I was like, what?
And the way the show framed it as the bookmobile was the important lifeline of humanity.
Yeah.
It's what simultaneously can make the show seem corny, but also what gives it its life.
Like its charm.
Its charm comes from
charm.
Just charm. That's the best phrase. That's the best word.
So, like, was there a point in the show where you guys actually thought it was going to continue, or did you guys know that it was probably destined to not be renewed or to continue past season 2? Like, was there any signs of success?
No, I don't think we were overly optimistic. I think we were kind of wondering and guessing. We didn't think we were doing badly. The show seemed to have pretty good ratings, and in some markets they were beating Power Rangers. So we were hoping and thinking that it would continue on. It wasn't until the last day of shooting that they told us, oh yeah, there's not going to be a 3rd season.
Okay, because for me, like, as I mentioned, I was like a toddler when your show was airing. My friend wasn't even in the country at the time when the show was airing, and I never knew a lot of people until years later that could tell me that. They're like, oh yeah, it actually was beating Power Rangers. So I was like, I gotta ask the actor that, like, did it or didn't it? Because I didn't live through that. Like, I came in like right at the end, when I have like a cognitive memory of just seeing some of your episodes actually airing on Fox Kids or on my local WB station.
Sounds like you were too young to even watch our show. We were trying to be like to a slightly older audience than Power Rangers.
Yeah, because I remember like being 4 or 5, like the first time I remember seeing it. Like, I grew up in like that Fox Kids era, but it was like when we were already in Zeo for Power Rangers. At least that's the time frame I can recall. And my friend over here just came back to America when Lost Galaxy just ended.
So yeah, I wasn't even because my family were living in Iceland at the time. Oh, so wow. It's like anything we got, it was always years after. And I think that's how I got this figure of JB. It's like the one piece of VR Troopers merch I had as a kid. It survived all this time. And I'm just wondering, it's like, did it just show up right as we were leaving? And it was something I got at the time. But
yeah, because for me, I grew up with VR Troopers due to people uploading it, obviously illegally, onto YouTube, and then it being on Netflix. Because I wanted to always watch it, I just never had the means to. And I mean, I like the show. I think the show's has its unique charm for being a 90s show, especially when Saban was like, I gotta bring everything over. I love everything Toei does. Let's make it happen. And everyone's just like, yo, Saban, I don't think this is a good idea. And he's like, it's gonna happen, bubby.
It's funny how some of the older shows, because I'm kind of nostalgic for some of the shows that I saw as a kid too. And, I think if I saw those shows as an adult, I would have thought they were kind of cheesy and, wouldn't have been into them. But when you, I don't know, just go back and look at some of the stuff and connect it to your childhood. There's something really appealing to that, and I can see why someone who would look back, like for example, like old Star Trek shows. You know, I didn't like Star Trek as a kid, but as an adult, because it was around in my childhood, I look back at those shows and go, ah, that was great. What was I thinking? those are really fun shows. But if they made something at that quality now, we would, you know, we would balk at it and it'd just be like, no, come on.
Yeah, because it's like that thing of what is it? The signs of the times of like effects. Like you always see kids nowadays going, "Oh, the old Godzilla movies are horrible because the man in a rubber suit." But you're like, that's all they had back then. We didn't have CG
Right.
and that. Because here's a question: when you guys were though on the show, did you guys actually search out your merchandise? Or you're like, I don't need to buy my own action figure. Or did you actually like go, I want my own action figure?
You know, another funny story to that too. I did buy that one that you just held up, but that was the only thing I got. And a friend of mine who was in the Coast Guard in Alaska, he called me up and said, "Hey, dude, there's an action figure with your face on it." I'm like, "What? No way!" And I remember they filmed. I mean, they took a bunch of photography, like you know, a 360 view, and they were going to make our action figure. So I remember they were going to do it, but I never saw it. And so my friend from Alaska just mailed me the action figure, and I still have it. So I have the
I
one.
don't remember you guys having flip heads or anything like
They
that similar to the.
they were actually I did some research into this to look
Okay.
into some of the toys.
Uh,
They made two. There was a Ryan Steele and there was a JB. The JB was a lot harder to find. It was like out in limited quantities. But they
You were the
essentially
chaser.
yeah, and so essentially it was not like the Bandai Power Rangers figures with the heads that flip, but it was just that it was like a removable helmet kind of situation.
Yeah, it was
But
the bodysuit. It would just
yeah,
clip on. Yeah.
yeah, clip-on bodysuit because they were produced by Kenner, and Kenner was doing that with their Batman toys. So they just said, "Oh, well, let's just do that for VR Troopers."
Right.
That makes sense. Okay.
Let's see. So, you talked about how you found out the show was ending on the last day of filming. But was there anything that they were discussing about anything beyond that, or was it always kind of this is what we're shooting right now and this is all we're worried about?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think we wrapped on the last day of shooting, and then they made the announcement that this is it. There's not going to be another season, and goodbye and good luck. That was it.
So they had no plans anyways. Like there was no inklings of going, oh hey guys, we're planning a third season, and then they're just like, no, it's canceled.
Yeah, I think they just said that it just wasn't picked up for a third season. So
Okay.
I don't think it was that we were canceled. I guess you could call it canceled, but we just weren't picked up.
Okay, so there was no like intention of them telling you, hey, we're gonna do new power ups and new villains or anything. Like no rumors or inklings. All right.
And I think they went on to make other types of shows with different characters. And it was only recently that I found out that they could have made more VR Trooper episodes with some of the Japanese footage, some of the Metal Hero shows.
Yeah, there was a rumor that you guys were going to be using the Rescue series eventually, but that was never verified. I heard.
Yeah, I don't know. And like I can't remember when Big Bad Beetleborgs came out, but they could have done the same kind of thing. We could have gotten new suits and we could have used that footage. It could have been completely different suits.
Yeah.
The footage was there, but for some reason, actually, I do remember the reason. Much later, after the show got canceled, I found out from somebody higher up that worked at the company said that we just didn't sell enough toys. So it wasn't so much the ratings. We were okay on ratings, but I think this is my opinion, is because we weren't on Fox and we weren't getting that that exposure and that daily time frame that Power Rangers was on. So we were at these weird times and just different times all over the country, and we weren't getting those ad dollars that you would get from Fox. And so I think because of that, we didn't sell enough toys. and that's where the money is.
Yeah, I know the toy sales is a big deal. Because we even stated we don't understand why Saban thought, let's not produce your toys with Bandai, the guys who were distributing them in Japan. Why? I don't know where that idea came from, because obviously not sticking with Japan might have hurt the sales in the first place. Because Kenner, like as Soundout knows, he has some of the Japanese stuff that was released for, was it Scheider?
Yes.
And like that quality stuff was really good. And Scheider was made in the 80s, and they were repurposing like all of your shows from like 84 to 87 for a 94 program, for a 93, 95 TV series. So I don't know why Saban or whoever at his, executive cabinet said, hey, let's go with Kenner over Bandai. Because I think that also, like you could say, hurt was the manufacturer.
I think as well as if you look at Kenner's product lineup, it was mostly action figures, and there wasn't like role play toys or vehicles, which Bandai probably sold more vehicles and role play and Megazords or Power Rangers than they did action figures. And I think that was something that a lot of fans have always wanted, is the pendants. They're the transformation devices for the VR troopers, and those never got made outside of a Happy Meal toy. So I think that it's entirely possible the toy line kind of ended up hurting the show because of whoever made the decision to go with Kenner over Bandai.
Yeah, and I never knew how that decision got made either, and why Kenner had such limited toys. Like, what was their strategy, and were they even at fault? Like, what was it, because we didn't get enough commercials and exposure to the market? I have no idea why it failed.
All
right. So moving along, in that kind of same vein of the uncharted territory we never got to see, was there anything specifically that you wanted to do with your character that just didn't get to happen due to runtime or the way the format of the show was? Was there ever like a storyline that you may have wanted to explore with the character?
Well, yeah. I mean, it would have been nice to have some kind of story that focused on the background of my character. Maybe something like how I became, this computer nerd or something like that. But what I was really hoping for and actively trying to push for was trying to expose more of my martial arts background, and trying to push for that expertise on the show. Really trying to push the intensity of the fight scenes, and I was always pushing myself even after the show. Even when I was on set, I was never sitting around. I was always training and trying to improve my skills, practice more gymnastics, and trying to come up with more interesting choreography. So I was really hoping to push the choreography as far as it can go. But because the Power Rangers was, they got so much criticism for being so violent, and letting little kids see these violent shows, and they thought it was like gonna produce these horrible kids into horrible adults, and which never happened. So because of that, our show was toned down with the martial arts a lot. So we had rules on our show that the Power Rangers didn't. One of them was you couldn't do any hits to the head. So they were trying to make the fight scenes a little bit more fun and campy. And I was always trying to push it to make it look, cooler,
Real.
badass. Yeah. So
I'm guessing you and Mr. Rabago, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
You guys must have hung out quite a bit, because I remember you stated that you were in his documentary at the Power Morphicon panel in 2018. Like, you were in like his little film that he made or whatever, talking about his martial arts career and stuff.
We did a couple of films together. Some like I guess they were more like training videos.
All right.
One was on just self-defense training, and another one was just kind of more on a background or training in his style of martial arts. Yeah, and I used to train at a school. We used to go to tournaments together and hang out. He had students that were competing, and he was training me on the side, and we would just hang out. He was such a cool guy, and I really miss him. So yeah.
Yeah, because I thought to bring that up because I just remember you saying that you would just hang out with him, and now that you're talking about how you guys had to push for choreography, I felt like no having him on the set is like supposed to be like this obvious like master and sensei in a dojo for a fictional show, and him being one in real life, he probably just sat there and was just like, why am I even here if they're not letting these people do martial arts?
Well, he didn't complain about that. I think the only people who really complained about the choreography was me and Brad. Um, Even though Brad didn't have a lot of experience, he did have some. He had enough to know what looked good and what didn't. And so we would both like eye roll to each other, going, what is this?" And we knew that the choreographer had no experience, if any martial arts experience. He certainly didn't have any choreography experience.
Yeah, because I know
So
when they did Masked Rider, they brought in actual other members of the Toei stunt team to do the Masked Rider spinoff at the time when you guys were still producing. But
I didn't.
who were your who were your choreograph guys? Were they also Japanese or were they just locals?
No, it was just one guy who just he must have known one of the producers. I think that was the case, and because we kept wondering, how did he get this job? He barely knew martial arts, and the choreography was so awful. It was the worst and the only bad part of the show was trying to push for that choreography, and the producers were backing him and not us. And Richard wasn't doing a lot of fight scenes with us, so he never saw that, and he was just happy to be on the show. So whatever stuff that he did, he just did it. And he was a lot older too, so he wasn't going to do anything that flashy anyway. Brad and I were early 20s, and we wanted to do some really cool stuff, and they just wouldn't let us. To your point about how someone might imitate violence, this whole argument about movies are violent or cartoons are violent, and video games now are the recent critique of violence, and there's no history that it shows that people watching these violent shows or games are going to lead to doing violent things at home. They might act out or try to mimic some of the stuff, but I mean, a lot of that has to do with good parenting and making sure your kids don't pick up something or kick their little brother or sister, or just think, don't hurt the dog. I mean, you got to explain things to your kids when they see something like that. Just don't do that.
Like the media doesn't have to parent the children, but to give the parents a guide as to what to teach their children.
Right. I mean, look at the old Roadrunner shows and Bugs Bunny, right? There's
Dynamite.
So violent, right? And did we have a problem then? I mean,
no.
And then of course
Dynamite.
There's always the discrepancy between animation and live action. If it's animated, it's fine. No one really cares that much. But it's live action. Oh, now the children will imitate it.
Okay, it's a weak argument, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's my favorite one is like how they used to say rock and roll's the gateway to the devil, man. And they even made it like a lore in Batman that's what he was listening to before they went out to see the movie that his parents got shot at. It's like, really now, rock and roll's the devil. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's always something in the media that's a scapegoat for behavior in society. And, it's time and time, it just leads, the studies show that it has to do with, now they're seeing that poverty has a lot to do with it. Your surroundings, the kind of neighborhoods you grow up in, parenting, the type of schools you're in. There's so many other factors, and people are so quick to blame like the most obvious thing. Oh, they see something violent, that must be why, the kids or the people who watch this are being violent because of what they're seeing. And it's not as simple as that.
Oh, exactly. So following the cancellation of VR Troopers, or just them not renewing it, I should say, were you ever actually approached to be moved over to another Saban property? Or did you have any intentions to want to continue working for Saban after VR Troopers?
I think secretly, right after the show, I was hoping that my career would kind of take off, and I didn't want to do a lateral move. I wanted to keep moving up and getting more closer to doing feature films, and that wasn't working out. I did get approached once by someone who did voiceover work. He was like the producer or something, and he had me audition for a Saban cartoon for voiceover work, and I didn't get it. Also, another role where I had to play a stereotypical black guy, and my voice, I guess, didn't sound black enough. So I mean, this was my whole thing in the '90s. That was just it was depressing. I kept being told I'm not black enough. I don't look black enough. I don't sound black enough. I mean, it got to the point where I was going on hundreds of auditions, and I just finally one day broke down and said, "Hey, ask the casting director straight up. Just tell me, is my acting that bad?" And she's like, "No, your acting was fine. It's just when you walked in here, I didn't know what you were. The role calls for a black person. When you walked in, I had no idea what you were." And so I think that led to the end of my career in acting. I just kind of slowly weaned myself off of that.
That is so rough to hear. That's like, wow. That's just like, you know, I can feel it for you. I can feel that like aggression and pain and stuff, like hearing that. That just sounds so difficult to hear stuff like that. And
the odd part was, if I'd done acting in the 80s, they were only hiring light-skinned blacks in the 80s. So if you think about like you know, Prince and Michael Jackson, that type of look, the guy from Miami Vice, I'm trying to think of other actors. Anyway, there was just a lot of light-skinned blacks that were getting work in the 80s, and I was talking to other people that were in the industry, and they were saying, yeah, they were just scooping it up, and I came in the early 90s, so I caught the tail end of it. And then by the 90s, they were only hiring dark-skinned blacks.
And that
went on for a long time, and so I just eventually realized what was happening and got out.
Man, that's a shame. I do express like feeling bad like that. That must suck, really.
It kind of seems that like the world of acting is almost discriminatory towards different groups of people at different times. It's like, what's popular?
It always changes.
It's never about your own skill, but how do you look? That's the first thing they look for.
Right. I feel especially bad for women in the industry, because it seems like, I mean, they're discriminatory by age, right? Once you get to a certain age as a woman in Hollywood, you're done. So, you know, men tend to go long careers, you know, to their 70s, 80s, or however long. Sometimes they get better as they get older. But for women, it's the opposite. It's much harder. I think the industry is pushing for more diversity now and more inclusion for minorities and women, but I still think a lot of it's stereotypical. Especially, I've noticed there's more stereotypes with men and more diversity with women. There's also more diversity on television shows, but feature films, you'll see less diversity. And there's always that ratio. You can't have too many blacks in one movie. Otherwise, then it's only gearing towards a black audience. So, you know, you have the mainstream type of movies where you have your one token, and then the rest, you know, it's so formulaic. I mean, and it's so obvious. But with television shows, it's definitely a lot more diverse.
Yeah, and do you think, though, it's also because there's that thing that the media likes to use as like the scapegoat, the Chinese or the international market? Do you think that's really like, do you fully believe like that's a real valid excuse for studios to say that, oh, we have to hit that international market? Or do you think that's just them saying they're just being cheap for being cheap? They just don't want to actually do the searching of getting other actors? Or do you think it's just like they don't want to lose that income from the international? Like it seems like a double-edged sword, right? It's like, oh, we want to be accepting, but then it's like, but we don't want to piss off our international market that gives us so much more money to be super white or whatever.
Yeah, after this is a whole nother thing. You know, they call it whitewashing of maybe what you would call international type roles that a person play. It would be like something like if you're playing an Egyptian character, they would hire a white character to play that role. But what you're bringing up now for the Chinese market, I believe they're the second largest film market in the world. And so they're definitely, I've been noticing, gearing more towards the Chinese market. Sadly, and you guys maybe know this better than I do, but they're downplaying blacks in movies for the Chinese market and including more Asian stars in movies, especially when they're trying to market towards the Asian market. Like I think when they did Force Awakens, they took I forget the actor's name, but they took
John Boyega.
They took him off the poster, or they put him really small, not featured him as much in the poster for the Chinese market. So I mean, it's sad the way they're going about marketing towards that. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think they sit in a boardroom and they think not whether an actor is a good actor, or, it just baffles me how they come up with it. But I think it has to do with marketing towards an audience, and will certain characters sell? I think it just comes down to marketing.
Yeah. Because I always hear like the double-edged sword of when they try to run their, I guess you would say their, what's the term I'm looking for, Sound? When they're trying to collateral control, like
the damage control.
Yeah, damage control.
Damage control, because it's like, you want to have more diverse films, right? And they make, get the right actors for the parts. But then it's like, oh, well, if you don't have if it's too much diverse, then this market doesn't like it. So then it comes down to, are they making the art of the film, or are they making the business decisions to make back their money? And it kind of feels like it's, with the big budget stuff, it always kind of goes to that. But with the smaller budget stuff, like you mentioned with TV, you get a lot more diversity, you get a lot more reflection of the world, as opposed to the filtered version of the world that is guaranteed to make the most money.
Right. And another part, and again, I'm not on the inside on this, so I don't really know, I'm speculating, but I think a lot of these films, or the creative people that want to cast certain actors, they have to sell this to investors. And so investors may be a group of Wall Street guys that have to sit there and go, nah, we don't think that cast will work. We don't think it'll sell, because they're looking at spreadsheets and looking at the data and marketing and the history of how it'll sell. I mean, they're trying to come up with a formula so they can make a return on their investment. So these are investment and marketing strategies. I don't think they're thinking about the art of it and, how you can sell, how a character should be portrayed and what character you should hire for the role, and make the story that you want to, sell. Maybe some of the bigger directors and producers can get away with that. Certainly indie films can do that. They tend to think outside the box and be more creative. But most of the mainstream movies, I think, they're trying to hit a formula that they think is going to make the most amount of money.
All right. So I guess since we talked about, obviously we're getting into like the industry side of movies to TV, could you actually just tell us what led for the full transition into animation on films and video games, and what was that time exactly like for you when you realized you were going to become an animator?
Where do I start? This was a tough, long road. So after acting, I was trying to figure out what kind of careers I wanted to get into. So I went back to training in martial arts, so that not training, I'm sorry, teaching martial arts. So I got hired to teach at a school in Brentwood, California, teaching almost like a mixed style of martial arts, but it was a little bit more traditional. And while I was doing that, I was still going out on auditions. But then I've done things like I've worked for different type of offices. I've worked in real estate. I got my real estate license. I did architecture, worked for an electrical engineering company, started learning computers then after the show when I knew nothing about computers as the computer nerd on the show. But afterwards, I started finding a passion towards computer design. So I thought I wanted to get into something like graphic design or architecture or something like that. I was leaning towards that. And on one of those jobs, I found out about computer animation. One of my coworkers did it at home on his home computer. And when I saw that, something about seeing something digital like that in 3D, it was still such a new thing at the time that I knew right then at that moment that was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so I found a school, went to a couple of different schools because it took a long time to get good enough to get work in that industry. So altogether, I'd probably been in school maybe 6 years, 6 or 7 years between two different schools, and going to taking art classes in between the two schools. So yeah, it was a long time.
All right. So how did you eventually?
Full time too. I was working full time while I was
Wow.
Oh wow.
So 2 schools, classes in between, and working just to get into the profession. That's amazing. So I guess I'll talk a bit about the movies after this because I want to just talk a bit about games because one of my friends wanted to know stuff about your work with Telltale. How did you like eventually come to work with them? Like, what was like the first project they assigned you to, and like how did you, I guess, go in for your first like interview to get your job or whatever? The full.
Yeah, I was working in the film industry first as an animator. So
Mm-hmm.
working on, like Hotel Transylvania, Alvin and the Chipmunks, and at the time I was working on the second Percy Jackson movie. And the company that did that was, I'll just cut to the end. They were going out of business, but they weren't telling us. They were slowly going bankrupt, and they told me, and I was working contract, so I wasn't a staff employee at the time. And when they were going to renew my contract, they told me, if you can find another job somewhere else, I would take it. And so I applied to a bunch of places, and Telltale Games gave me a call and wanted to hire me. And just as that happened, that's when the company I was at announced that they were going under, and they had to lay everyone off.
Wow.
So I luckily was able to jump ship right at the right time. And the first that I worked on with Telltale was The Walking Dead.
Okay. Now this is so since my one friend who contributed these questions, Fighter Cows, he wanted to know like, could you talk about the video gaming industry, and like dealing with crunch time? Because he was saying that like crunch time is a major factor when it comes to just designing and programming games in general. And like, can you tell us how it affected either you and your team when you were working on these games for Telltale?
Actually, the film industry was way worse.
Okay.
I've only worked for 2 video game companies, and I didn't have to do any overtime. Or maybe at Telltale, maybe 3 or 4 times I had to stay late and do overtime. But it was so rare. And I don't know why, because I have heard that rumor that the overtime is horrible. But I think it's only certain departments, like QA testers, maybe live ops, or some certain positions where they're required to stay longer, or maybe the tail end of the production pipeline, people who maybe do lighting or something, anything at the end of the project, visual effects maybe. But yeah, I personally haven't experienced it, and I really don't know many people in the industry that has worked overtime. It's at least among animators, it hasn't been a thing, but I've definitely heard some horror stories about the video game industry. And if you want more insight on it, I think that episode of the Patriot Act has an episode just on the video game industry, and that's where I heard most of the rumors about what was going on, and it's pretty insightful.
Yeah, no, because he immediately was like, "Yo, get him to try to see if he can expose anything." Because he's like, "I used to want to be a video game designer, and the place that tried to pick me up was just like jackasses to all their former employees, so I didn't take up the contract."
Yeah, I think it depends on the company. The company I'm with now is fantastic. It is hands down the greatest company I've ever worked for. They treat their employees so well, and they absolutely don't want you burning yourself out or working overtime. So I think it really depends on the company you're with. So yeah, certain companies, I won't name any, I've heard rumors about, they're absolutely horrible to work for. Others are great. So it just depends.
And how aware were you of obviously Telltale's financial issues before you left? Because I remember they were going under right when Power Morphicon 2018 happened, and I think you said something like to me or one other guy when we were at your table that it was like an NDA, like no one no one's supposed to know that it's supposed to be happening, even though it was already out on the media before they finally closed their doors or whatever.
Well, I don't know if it got leaked or not, but I think they kept it really quiet because it looked like, first of all, they were doing all this hiring of Telltale had, let me back up. Telltale was really trying to run like a low budget company. I mean, they were paying really low. They were trying to squeeze the most out of their employees. They were hiring people with not much experience, like fresh out of college. And they were trying to run this low budget thing because they had this niche market in this style that they were producing, and it worked in the beginning for them. But then people were getting burnt out on that low quality and that same kind of formula that they were doing. So they were trying to, they brought in a new CEO and they were trying to kind of upgrade the company. They brought in a new game engine. They started hiring all these people. This was towards the end now. So they brought in the Unity game engine. They brought in all these people with tons of experience, these really smart guys that were going to make this game much better. And I was working on the new Stranger Things video game for Netflix. And I was like spearheading like some of the new animation style and creating all this new content for it. And it was, I mean, we had a date and we had all these investors, and it was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then boom, they called us down, and in half an hour, they said, come down to this big room, and they laid it on us. We're done. And it was like a 15-minute talk. Like, sorry, we blew it. We thought, it's the CEO at the time said it was his fault. He's like, it just, or I think he said that. I forget what his excuse was, but it just didn't work out.
Yeah, because I just remember, I think there were already inklings on the internet that summer when Power Morphicon 2018 happened, and then it was October, I believe, Telltale, or late September. Telltale was like, we're bankrupt, we're out of business, I remember, something like that. I just remember it was already like, people already knew somehow on like Reddit and all the forums, and I was like, how did this, like,
It
what?
must have been maybe days before, but it was a huge surprise to even some of the higher ups in the industry. I mean, in our company that had no idea. So, because I talked to a lot of people afterwards, and it was a shock to a lot of people.
All right. Because I remember hearing like weird inklings, but I guess it was never really like real finite for in the company itself. Like people just heard like rumors all over the place.
There could be speculation as well, just based on statistical facts too.
It could have been, yeah.
I'm sorry, I do remember this now. The year before, when they hired this new CEO, he did a round of layoffs. He laid off about a quarter of the company. And I think that's when there was speculation there was trouble with the company. So people were starting to think, oh, Telltale's in trouble. So that
might have actually been why that summer, like I heard like a lot of stuff from people that were insiders, like not like I mean like the legitimate reporters that were like, checking receipts for companies and studios, like the people that are not like just tabloid saying that. It was like people like going, oh, look at these sales, look at this and that, like the people that actually knew how, I guess, financial businesses work and stuff. Because there's a lot of people in the gaming industry that are like, oh, look at these layoffs, they're dying. But then there's other people who are like, well, let me go and do the math. Okay, yeah, no, you're right. Like that kind of guys, like the ones that would go and try to financially debunk the claims. And then they were just like, trying to figure out, like, I guess you would say, like a betting pool of when's it actually going to happen.
All right.
Such. So Soundout, can you get the next question? I think that would be 17, since he already brought up what movies he did. So.
Oh yeah, let's switch over to movies. It's an industry I've been a part of too. So that's why I get these questions. So talking about Hollywood and movies, what was key moments that you remember maybe working on that have stories behind them? From working on Alvin the Chipmunks or Hotel Transylvania or Percy Jackson, just any kind of weird random stories of working on those, how it was a different experience, or something unique about them?
Well, I think what was unique is just for me personally, all these movies that I worked on were at different companies. And so it was a unique experience seeing how different companies approach creating a film. But I was already realizing how tough the industry was when I did the first film. The level of quality and the speed at which the product had to be turned out. Like we had a quota and a deadline for putting out this stuff, and it had to be a certain type of quality, and you had to get used to changes and people not liking your ideas, because most of the ideas were coming from the animators, like the acting choices and the action. There would be thumbnails or some artwork that would give you suggestions, or an animatic that would tell you, story beats. But it was up to the animator to come up with the ideas. And so you'd come up with something, block it out, and then the director or the animation lead would be like, nah, change this, do that. So the second project I worked on was, I believe it was Hop. And that was at that same company, Rhythm and Hughes, that went out of business, that did Percy Jackson. So that was my second one. That was a big jump. The first one was a company in Dallas, and that one was Open Season 3. And so that wasn't so bad. That was my first project out of college. But working on Hop was probably the most brutal, that and Hotel Transylvania, for different reasons. But in both cases, the director just never liked the choices that you made. So you're constantly making changes. Sometimes it felt like they were changing just for the sake of change. So it was like, all right, I'll just do exactly what the director wants. So those two films were pretty rough. But the funnest experience I had was Alvin and Chipmunks3. That was the funnest, most enjoyable time I had animating. Absolutely loved it. I could have done that for the rest of my life. I had so much fun with the characters. They were fun to work with, and the director was really easygoing and really loved the animators' input and suggestions on acting choices. So we just had a great time on that one.
All right, to bridge off of that, do you have any specific scenes in the movies where it's playing, you would be like, that was all me, or that was me and my team? Are there key moments that you can recall, when you just see the film, it was done by either you or at least your core block of guys? Because when it's say Alvin and the Chipmunks, that takes a lot of people to do. So it's is there parts where you can tell which one was you or which one was whoever it was?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because each shot would be designated to one animator. I guess the one fun moment for me was there was a shot, and it was a really long acting shot that I got in Alvin and the Chipmunks. And in that film, like you said, there were a lot of animators. I think there were something like 40 to 60 animators working on that movie. And so we would get in this kind of this theater room where we'd watch our dailies. And I just remember getting so much praise and a lot of laughs for this long shot. And it was unusually long. And so there was a lot of pressure to get this shot right. Those bigger shots are beefier and more intense, or more pushing the comedy more, or maybe the acting has to be really pushed, and so there's a lot of pressure to get that right. A short little shot doesn't, depending on what it is, probably doesn't take as much work. But yeah, trying to get all those beats in there and making a full long shot like that work was tough. And the feedback that I got from my peers was pretty amazing. I got a lot of laughs and a lot of praise for that, and that felt pretty good.
Now, which scene precisely was that for, though? So, if I'm watching the movie right now, I would be like, that was him. Do you remember, or do you or is it just you just remember the reaction?
Yeah, no, it's I don't know how to describe it because I don't remember the full movie. So it's where Alvin is talking to one of the Chipettes, and it's this long scene where they're walking on the beach and they're collecting things, and it's this long. They're just walking on the beach. I forgot what they're even collecting, but it's just this back and forth, and he says something cocky and walks off screen, and she just gives him this like attitude or something like that. I don't remember. If you wanted to repeat the dialogue, I'm not going to remember it.
Yeah, nah. I was wondering, like, if I go to like watch it, like, say, just to find out what scene it was, be like, all right, there it is. This is the scene, and be like, there it is, guys. This is the one.
I don't remember the context.
The context.
But yeah, it's the scene where they're walking on the beach. Alvin walks off, says something, to piss off the Chipette, or whatever her name was, and yeah, that was my shot. And I had lots of other shots in the movie, but that one got the most reactions.
Building off that, you mentioned how as animators you make the acting choices for the characters. Do you feel that your acting experience actually helped make that transition into kind of learn that animating the acting kind of part of the job?
Yeah, absolutely. Only as far as awareness goes of acting, and because I have some maybe not so popular opinions about acting. I'll just come out and say it. I think acting comes very natural to some people, and other people have to work really hard at it. I think it's like singing or any other talent. I think certain things, and acting more so, I think some people can just walk on a set and do great acting, and other people can work on it for years and still be terrible. I was never a great actor. I think something for VR Troopers, I didn't train that hard to do that, but there wasn't much asked of me, so judge it how you will. It was what it was, but I think I was just more observant about acting in general. So I wouldn't say it's my acting training that helped me with animation, but just observing good acting. I think that is really what a good animator does, is they can study their reference, because that's what most animators do, is they research and reference actors and movies. So if you know how to look up and point out good acting and be a good judge and critic of acting, you don't have to be able to do it. You just have to know when something looks good and when it doesn't, and then be able to put that into your animation.
All right.
I like it. Yeah.
I'm just double checking the questions to make sure we didn't already accidentally answer some. So, I guess you kind of mentioned it earlier, but is there what is a major difference between animating for video games versus television and film? Like certain qualities, I guess, in the actual style or production. Like what are actual, I guess, technical terms or whatever for the differences between video games versus films and stuff?
Not much. I think there used to be this kind of opinion that among the industry that animators who work in movies can't work in games and vice versa. It's the same technique, it's the same software, it's the same approach. The only thing that's different in video games, it has to look good from multiple camera angles. In movies, you have a locked camera, so it only has to look good from one angle. And since you're working in 3D, things can look good from one angle, but if you turn the camera around, it'll look horrible. And a lot of animators, or at least some of the directors and the experienced people in film will tell you that. Like, yeah, the shot looked good, but if you'd ever turn that camera around, it would look horrible. Because they only focus on one angle. So and they get so much more time to work on a shot than you do in the video game industry. So video games tend to get a lot of criticism for not having the same quality as what you would see in films, although I think that's changing. But it comes down to how much time an animator gets to work on a shot. If given enough time, it'll look good. And also the people who are giving direction on the shot. a lot of times it may not be the animator that's making the shot look good. It's the director pointing out, either acting choices or flaws in the animation, and they help guide it into that, that top level of quality. And then the other thing is there's that part of which is more common in video games. Well, I guess in films too. A lot of shots are motion capture, so there's not really much an animator has to do other than clean it up. So yeah, if you can't tell the difference between motion capture and hand-keyed animation, well, that's the main difference. And it's done in both film and video games, but more so in video games, I think.
I guess like we've hit almost every note we wanted to for this interview, so I guess we have just a few wrap-up questions, which are, what are your overall thoughts on like your fans that remember you as either J.B.Reese or the fans that come up to you now at conventions or whatnot for being an actual film and video game animator? Like, is there two different sides to that coin, obviously, since you have obviously J.B.Reese, the character from a TV show, versus now your actual profession of doing production in film and video games, like when you get to like meet them and travel and talk and stuff?
Yeah, I don't think I get any, well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say I don't get much questions or curiosity about my animation experience. I think it only came up once where we were doing a panel at Power Morphicon, and they were asking all of us like, so what are you guys doing now? And so I brought up the fact that I was working on Walking Dead, Telltale Games, and Batman and Guardians of the Galaxy, and we got more cheers for that than anything about VR Troopers. So that kind of blew me away about how popular Telltale Games video games were. So that was the only time that I'd gotten such positive feedback having anything to do with animation.
So you're saying like we're one of the first that's like, hey, we want to talk to you about the gaming industry, and you're like, what?
I mean, but usually it comes up after VR Trooper. So it's first,
Yeah.
So you were on a Tony Braxton video, or you were in video games, or you did, in movies, and you were on this TV show, and oh, and by the way, you're in video games now. So tell us about that. And so it's more of an afterthought to what I'd originally been known for. So.
Yeah, because I thought the best way for an interview is always try to go at least in chronological order of person's events.
Sure.
But
us animators aren't getting pulled out of our offices to be asked for interviews. Like we're kind of the unknown people, just like the grips and gaffers, the lighting, the cameraman. We're the behind the scenes people that don't get a lot of credit for the content that you see in movies and video games.
Yeah, I find that very interesting because like it is obviously a very niche thing where you gotta actually like focus on stuff, because I know there's other animators out there that people do try to reach out to, but that's usually people that make themselves known as, oh, I'm an animator who's also a producer or director of this obvious thing, because you see that a lot with like a lot of the main, I guess you would say, companies out of Japan. You have like Square Enix, and you have Platinum and Nintendo, where their directors actually are like one of their actual head animators on their own game that they're self-publishing, versus I guess when you have like these AAA games, indie games, or major producers in America where they're just kind of like the old style, almost like a Disney film, where you have, here, I'm the director and executive producer, and then here's your team of people under you that work at the company, kind of, per se. I think,
sure.
Would you say that's one of the issues of the gaming industry? Is that like how the two sides react, I guess, Western games versus Eastern games companies, maybe?
Yeah, I think there's more respect for animation in the East, and here, I don't know what it is. I think they focus on the stars. We're so starstruck by seeing the characters. We fall in love with the characters that we play with in a video game or we see in a film, and we don't think about the people who make them, except some of the famous directors, of course. But yeah, there's so many people behind the scenes that help make those films come to life. And a lot of people don't realize, even I didn't realize, even after working in the industry for so many years, that most of what you see in these action movies are green screen. A lot of it is like visual effects and CG, and even when it's not supposed to look like CG, it might be a matte background painted by an artist. They have to paint away certain things. They have to change, you know, the lighting or the mood of the sky. You know, there's always some kind of digital touch up to almost every scene you see in a movie, especially the big blockbuster movies. And so the people behind the scenes, if you stay after a movie and just watch all the credits of all the people who work on a film, it'll blow your mind. It takes up almost 1/4 of the movie just to read all the credits for everybody involved. And they just don't nearly get enough credit for what they do.
Yeah, I had a friend.
That's something I actually do every time I see a movie. Is I sit through the entire credits.
Good for you.
I've also worked in the film industry on crew for lighting, so I think it's also kind of like that same kind of thing of, you know, it's like thinking of, well, if my name was up on a credit, not most people aren't going to see it, but someone's got to see it. Someone's got to appreciate the work here, because it was, you know, it's a collaborative effort between hundreds of people to put together a product, and most people don't ever think about all of the work put into it and just focus on the big names that the studios promote as the names for marketing.
So you totally understand then.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it has to do with that there's not enough featurettes showing how movies are made. You know, they used to do that. Remember old DVDs? They would have behind the scenes of how a movie was made, and they used to show how animators, you know, do their thing, and how I kind of missed that. I wish there's not enough interest in that, but I found it fascinating even before I got into animation, just seeing how the magic is done.
Yeah, I used to watch the old Disney ones.
Yeah, the old Disney one. I was going to bring this up. I collect home video stuff too, so this is like all right down my alley. That's how I got interested in working in the industry, was because, you know, here's a movie, and then here's your second disc with like 5 hours of content on how everything was made. And then nowadays it's like, oh, here's your movie, and here's like 30 minutes maybe of this. It's like Pixar movies used to be like that. It was like a whole second disc of bonus features. Now it's 5 featurettes and maybe a music video. And I think that's because of the shift to digital. Because it's almost like they don't put as much into the physical release. Because I think that there is, you know, it's a certain market for people that want to see the behind the scenes stuff. They don't seem to cater to it very often anymore. It seems like they're super reserved. But then an older film gets a re-release. Like there was a new release of RoboCop recently that had 3 edits of the movie, 9 hours of bonus features, and 4 audio commentaries, and it felt like the good old days again.
Yeah, I think there's, and I'm just guessing here. You guys can tell me if my opinion's way off, but my guess is that that the audience, that people want to see behind the scenes of the actors themselves and their personal lives more than to see how the sausage is made. I think they care about, like, for example, I really got into Stranger Things, and when I started looking up, like, you know, behind the scenes stuff, it kind of seemed like they were focusing on, you know, the kid actors just goofing off and having fun on the set, and seeing what their lives are like and how it changed their lives. And I'm starting to notice that also in behind the scenes movies, is they're following the actors more rather than, you know, actually showing, especially with, you know, post-production on how the movie is made. It might be that it's just too technical for people and they kind of tune out and feel like, that's not interesting. I want to see how people react to stardom, you know. How much money did they make, or, you know, what are they doing? What did they buy a car afterwards? You know, they tend to focus on stuff that's a little bit more emotional like that, you know, with the actors, and not so much with the technical tedious nitty-gritty of making a scene. So that's my guess.
Yeah, because I remember the last.
I agree with that for sure, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with it too, because I remember the last best like documentary that focused on not just the actors but the staff making the film was like the Lord of the Rings Return of the King one, where it was like a actual TV aired like 3-night event where it was like, you know, 3 1-hour parts where it would show you what the actors were doing while they were filming, but then show the makeup team and show Peter Jackson, because it would literally be a part where like Sir Ian McKellen is like on just set reading a book, not paying any attention to the people filming him while they're filming the people around him, just doing the lights and setting up the props. And he's just reading the actual Lord of the Rings book, then comparing it to the script to make sure he gets his character right. And then you see in the background Orlando Bloom chasing down Viggo Morrison to put a robe on, because if you were in full makeup and you went to go pick up like lunch for the crew, or went to go like produce your photos that you would have from your rental camera and go get them made, you had to wear a, you know, like an actual giant like robe cloak to go into town if you were still in makeup. So Orlando Bloom's trying to get Viggo to put the cloak on, but Viggo's, no, I want to go into the city wearing my stuff, sign autograph for kids and families and see people. I'm like, you can't do that, the NDA. And Viggo's like running around trying to get away from them. And like it was one of those ones where it's like a very good blend of the Lord of the Rings Return of the King. I mean, for me, I'm a big Tokusatsu buff. That's why I was also trying to get a hold of you and other actors, because over in Japan, if you don't know, the actors were doing these, like a lot of these like Japanese actors for the kids shows were doing these like Twitter videos when COVID was a thing, saying, hey, we're going to get through this, like promotional videos, and like kind of doing these like pseudo quasi anniversaries where they would do Google Hangouts with their cast to try to like reinvigorate morale in Japan. So my idea was, oh, let me start contacting American actors, Japanese actors, and see if I can't try to do the same with interviews, and see if we can't just learn how they're doing or what they think about stuff in reality. And so that's why I'm glad you came to us and like gave us this opportunity, was because I just was like, hey, content's low. I want to hear these stories about people who've acted, who've either had to do stuff as being an actor, whether it's being the choreographer, going into animation, because there's so much stuff that you don't know. Because like for Tokusatsu, if you've seen, like, there's miniaturettes, there's guys making foam rubber suits, there's actors that actually are their own stunt double wearing those suits in the Japanese footage. Like some of those guys, they were their own stunt team. They were the actor and the guy in the suit. So you want to know how did you guys figure out how to adapt all this when you have this footage and you're like, whoa, these guys are doing crazy stuff and we're just pretending we're them, and all this, I guess, rigmarole, you know?
It almost makes me want to go out and do my own interviews, but for people who are like under the mask or behind the scenes, or, you know, I want to see stories about how they made it. Like, how did they get into such an obscure skill set or department in this industry? How did they find what, you know, everybody, you know, wants to become some famous actor, writer, or director, or now it's YouTube star, or whatever it is. They want to be the star. They want to be the focus of attention. But I would have been fascinated like crazy in high school if I'd known, even outside of this industry, to see more obscure professions that you could get into. You know, thinking back then, you'd only think, well, what professions are there? Just the things you can rattle off the top of your head: doctor, lawyer, cop, you know, military, you know, just there's so many obscure career paths that people could take. And I don't think they present that to people. Even when I went to animation school, I didn't realize that you could get into all these little niche departments inside a studio. Like it goes pretty deep, and they don't explain all that to you. So I think that's more fascinating, and I think those people should be interviewed and asked how they got there. So
yeah, because that's like what I told Soundout, how we became friends, was like, we were like, well, we want to do a news site, we want to also interview these actors, we want to try to be like historians and stuff. So like that was the idea. Was like, the idea was just like, if we can't fully get into the industry, why can't we, like, I guess you would say I guess you would say, like,
I guess bring more awareness.
Yeah, awareness.
Make people think about the people animating stuff. More of documentary, more historical. Just kind of have that idea of, you know, there's the stuff you see, but then there's all the stuff that went into making what you see. It's not just about watching the content, but all the jobs, all the people, all the little parts that came together, and bring more awareness to that, to have more appreciation for those people.
Yeah, because like that's why we reached out, because we were like, you're a guy who's done multiple things, so it's like you didn't just do American Tokusatsu, you did movies, so it's like you got a good I can't think of the term. Why am I not coming up with the term? But you got
film industry always says good resume.
Yeah, you got a good resume.
You got a good resume. It's like, what have you got?
A good resume and good filmography. It's like like us trying to reach out to Japanese people, even though we have a language barrier, we're still trying to make the efforts to go, hey, there's people over here that don't know anything about you, that only know it from Power Rangers, that only know about it through this, and you guys are guys that literally got explosions and pyro shot at you. You got a lot of blank bullets. People want to know your tale, like, so that was the idea too, because that's what I've always thought of that. I've always just loved like the film industry, the action industry of movies and all that crazy jazz, and that's luckily how I met all these people. So like, I appreciate you sitting down with us and doing this. And I guess we got sidetracked though, but like what's your thoughts on just traveling and seeing like your fans now? Like when you go to Power Morphicon or where I think you've done a few conventions on the East Coast, right? For just I guess Power Rangers and VR Troopers in general.
No, mostly here on the West Coast. I think I only went to one convention on the East Coast, and that was in Georgia. But yeah, I haven't really gone. I haven't done that many conventions in general. It was only this kind of resurgence after the 20-year anniversary of VR Troopers that people started searching me out, or Brad and I don't think he'd done much either before that anniversary, and. Also, I changed my name, so a lot of people had a hard time finding me. But yeah, but once I did, I'm sorry, I did one in Kentucky too, so forgot about that. But yeah, it was mind-blowing that people even remember the show because it was 20 years later. I thought the show was just forgotten and lost into obscurity. I had no idea that people even remember the show, and then people were explaining to me, oh yeah, the people who used to watch that show are all grown up now, and they love the nostalgia of seeing it, and now it's on DVD and it's on Netflix, and so there was this brief resurgence of the show, and so yeah, I started getting invited to these Comic Cons. But yeah, it was just more shock, and I really appreciate people like you asking me about the show and having that curiosity. I just thought people didn't care or thought it was a stupid show, so. It's nice that you reached out to me. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So another weird question that just popped in my mind is that since you do go to the conventions, you see how obviously Power Morphicon, Mr. Scott Zillner tries to bring over the Japanese actors for Sentai. Since he also does Japan World Heroes, would you want to meet your Japanese counterpart, Mr. Hiroshi Watari, who played Spielbahn? Would you love to like just interact? Like what questions would you have for him if you met him? Like if you got to meet?
Similar questions, like was he an actor first or was he a martial artist first? And was he in the suit? Was he doing all his own stunts? And how revolutionary was doing those type of shows at that time? Because I know very little about the Japanese market and that type of Tokusatsu programming. I don't know anything about it. So yeah, I would just ask him about the history of it, how it, what time period was he in when he got into it? Was it the height of that type of programming, or, and how difficult was it for him to get that role? Like those kind of questions.
Yeah, because he actually, when he did the show you were based on, he did a previous show for Toei called Charavan in the Metal Hero series. And Charavan was actually the predecessor to Scheider, which was Ryan's second suit. So he did 2 shows of the lead character, and then one of those shows of which was your character. So he was really tied to Toei for like, I would say a better part of 5 years in the 80s, doing shows for them. Oh. And he also was a ballet and martial arts guy.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like Von Damme.
Yeah, I found out about the ballet part through Tokusatsu historian August Ragon, because he met Watari, and he said like he was a really excellent like ballet and just dancer in general. Like he would do, I think, salsa and ballet.
Really?
It was to help with his choreography, his timing.
It definitely helps with movement and flexibility and agility for sure.
All right.
Yeah, I used to take dance classes before I did VR Troopers. Not ballet though.
Yeah, ballet is tough. That one's rough.
Yeah,
that one's rough. I should know. That's how I got in the wheelchair. No, I'm just kidding. That's a new excuse.
Oh my.
That's a new excuse to the lore of Wheelchair, of the many excuses he gave when people ask, "Hey, why are you in a wheelchair?" Ballet, car accident.
Oh,
Uh,
that's a good one.
yeah, I think one of my favorite ones. One of my favorite ones someone said was like, "Yo, you should say like your parents did it." I'm like, "No, that's bad."
Don't go for that one.
Yeah,
I
I
like
tried to tell
ballet.
them.
I think ballet is the new answer for a while.
Yeah.
I tried to do a Jean-Claude Van Damme split, and the next thing you know, there goes my spine. All right,
All
and
right.
yeah,
I think
the last
I'll,
two. You just got the last two.
I'll take.
Question, since I've been bringing this up all the time. How did you get into lighting, and what was that like?
So essentially, okay. Now I got to think this back for a little bit. So like I had a fascination in the film industry, from mostly behind the scenes stuff, and so I wanted to go into it, and I was going to film school, and I was trying to find like kind of where was I gonna to fit in this, and so I looked at lighting because I thought about it being the job that no one's ever going to talk about until it's done wrong, which made it a huge challenge of like always get it right and no one will ever complain to you, but no one will ever praise you either. If lighting is good, no one says a word. It's when it's bad that everybody talks about it.
Right, good point.
And so I found that kind of be a bit of a challenging field. And then I eventually got into like, learning angles of here's light here. How do you make sure you have a natural shadow versus an unnatural one? How do you make it look like there's one light source, even though you're putting 3 lights up? So it kind of became a lot of mental gymnastics to try to learn all that. And I thought that was like such a cool field to work in.
Now, did you have to have a background in fine arts? Because when I went to art school, I didn't realize how much you had to understand color and tone and all these things to do with traditional art to understand lighting for film and photography. And for digital stuff.
That was something that I kind of picked up on the fly. It wasn't like a requirement, but it was something I knew I needed to learn. So I kind of did my own research to kind of study, and I started looking at film and TV completely differently at that point. I was like looking at how were things lit. I was looking back at old Saban shows where it's like they just flooded the set with light so that there's no shadow, so they didn't have to adjust it. It just seemed like it was like here's the lighting and then we're good to go for the whole day kind of situation. And then just working with color tones and how the different colors relate to different feelings to portray things in different scenes. Old silent films used to put color filters over some scenes to give it a different feeling. Like the 1928 Phantom of the Opera would put green when things wanted to be mysterious, or red when things were intense. And so to kind of take that and kind of apply it to the tint of the light to make it have the feeling that it's supposed to be conveying.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I wish I could have gotten into lighting a little bit more. We had to do it a little bit for animation, but that's when I realized, well, that's a whole nother discipline that you have to learn, and you have to understand traditional art to really get good at lighting.
And then there's the other side of it when you do rigging, where it's just, okay, now drag this 100-pound cable through the desert for a few hours.
Because that was Creed 2, right?
That was Creed 2. Creed 2 was filming in New Mexico, and we had to light a house that had no electricity that was out in the middle of the desert. So it was just power. It was like 3 generators and just cable. So much cable. And then we had to bury all the cable because they were doing drone shots. So we had to hide everything. And we had to rig up all the lights and it was just like, just getting it done was the hard part there before we even filmed anything.
Hey, at least Stallone himself, properly thanked everyone that was a part of the production team. Like, he took time to like talk to everyone on that set.
Yeah, he was very appreciative of his crew. I thought that was really nice, is that he finished filming his scenes and then hung around for a couple hours talking to people, taking pictures, learning what each job was of each person working on the set, to just kind of give appreciation to all the individual working components, which I thought was very classy.
Nice.
My favorite part where you're like, yeah, Michael B. Jordan came in and then he had to go do like Black Panther promotion, like red carpet screenings.
He was like in and out in like a couple hours. It's like I saw him a couple times, but yeah.
And I'm just some guy who was a journalist.
Okay, writing is awesome.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, and
writing myself.
and I'm just a journalist. That's why I run most of the stuff for the site when it comes to what's going on. Like, all right, we got work to do.
And what do you like to write, or
Well, I originally went for screenwriting and short stories, and then somehow it just led to I work quicker and better when it comes to press and media than I do my own actual writing. Because whenever I want to write something, I'm like one of those guys where I got to create the universe, the lore. I have to have the Bible to make sure I don't contradict myself, because I hate watching other people who write like these very superhero-esque stories, and then like there's like that plot hole that you sit there and you're like, if he would have done that, then this villain wouldn't exist now. You know, like one of those instances.
I want to get to your opinion about what's going on in media right now, since you study journalism. But just as a side note, I have to say that the hardest thing I've learned in animation was telling a story. I think that was the hardest class out of everything I've done. And we had to do everything from traditional art to rigging characters, modeling, texturing, lighting. I even took a film class, but story was absolutely insanely hard.
Yeah, because my problem is I can think of a definitive beginning and a definitive end, but my problem is getting A to Z correctly with making sure no one gets left behind in the plot or the development. Because I always have this thing where I create a cast and it feels like that very standalone solo hero, but then he has all of his friends that are with him, and it always seems like it's always the fifth man or the third man that just seems to vanish from like my mindset once we get to the second act. It's like, where'd Johnny go? He was here in the first act. Why is he not in the second act? Where we have all the falling action. So that was my biggest problem.
At least you got that far. But yeah, what do you think about journalism in general? You know, you hear all this talk about fake news, and then you got all this stuff going on, the political divisions, the point of views from the different news media. Like, do you think journalism is dead and now it's just like, you know, like this Ron Burgundy type of news programming where you just...
It feels very tabloidish. Like, yeah, it feels very tabloidish, where I always wanted to do news where it was like more of the upbeat kind, where it's like I just want to talk about, like, if I'm going to be reporting about, say, movies and comic books and products, you know, for kids and adults to all enjoy, I'm going to try to focus on, you know, okay, this movie is in production, or hey, unfortunately this show's being canceled. Here's this newest actor. But like, I never wanted to get so ingrained into knowing about like political or economic stuff, because I feel like that's a degree of intensity that you need to really want to do, where you want to be someone like that feels like you're literally thrown into a war zone. And I feel like that's what the problem is with the media and news, is that it always feels like a war zone. It's like, we got to report on this politician being bad or this politician being good, and then having the issue of like, what if your producer, your guy that runs the business says, oh, you don't agree with my views, so I don't want you working here. But then you go to another place and you do have somewhat similarities, but they're too radicalized. Because that's the one thing I hate, is I really hate the very politically radically drawn like narrative in the media now, where it's like, if you work at Fox News, you probably are a Nazi, or if you work at like CNN or MSNBC,
find the opposite of that.
yeah, you're obviously like a gentle dandelion blowing in the breeze. Like, I don't like that mentality. I really don't. And I can't see myself doing legitimate, like, straight up real, guys, we got to talk about the issues in Washington, and then be like, yeah, I would not be able to handle that style, because I'm just like, dude, why are you making the world sound more depressing than it really is? I can't be a part of that stuff.
And to build off of that, it kind of comes down to entertainment media has also become a lot like that, where there is a lot of that war zone division. And, you know, something that, you know, we got a couple writers that will do news articles, and it's always like, the thing is, anyone comes to me and says, oh, should we do an article on this? I say, okay, well, do we have 3 legitimate sources saying that this is a thing happening? And what is the subject matter? Because if it's something like, you know, oh, there's behind the scenes drama with this show, but you can't confirm any of it, then I don't want us writing about it, because that's not That's not news at that point. That's rumors or speculation or inside sources. You know, whatever inside source and that news site wants to run it, they can run it. But until it's something that's more concrete and confirmed, like it's been officially announced, or something that comes from a lot of legitimate sources, that's when we start to run those articles. Not just based off of here's a rumor. It's not news. That's just speculation based on some information that one person may or may not have gotten.
Yeah, because I just don't like that mentality of like this weird rush to action for news, or just like let's just be so radicalized, whether it's the good or the bad or the in between. I don't know, like I watch the news and I sit there and I can talk about it, but I don't feel like I can freely talk about it anymore because people are just so easy to jump to conclusion and defame. Like, but the fact that people are doxing people or trying to defame people, like that cancer culture mentality, is also an issue of wanting to just be able to speak your opinion, even if you know what you're saying isn't supposed to be malicious. Someone's always going to try to spin it to their argument. I feel like is another issue, and I feel like that's one of the issues why I like doing just talking about like hobbies in a journalistic way rather than like I guess hobbies and movies, because it won't get me drugged into something that could literally affect people's livelihoods either.
Yeah, something I was just thinking about, even as we're talking about this. You know, we're you know, this whole talk is about, you know, the action and the entertainment industry, and you know the things that we see and the content that we are experiencing, like all the action, the drama and stuff. You know, a lot of that started in American media, and it now, don't you find it ironic that the people who grew up with all this action and drama are also looking for that in our news, in our journalism, in our reality TV, even in sports? Like, it seems like Americans got kind of desensitized to all that action we grew up with. And so now we need it more intense. And it seems to bleed into other areas of our lives. And it seems like we keep looking for the next car crash. We want to see, you know, we've already seen it in movies. Let's see it in real life. We've, you know, other countries, I don't think had that. I grew up in Germany originally, even though I said I grew up in Massachusetts, but I first grew up in Germany. And there was no TV. You had the news in the evening, but there was no movies or TV shows. And so, I mean, now there is, but you know, back then there wasn't. It just, you know, you listened to the radio or you read newspapers and books. And America just got fed this overconsumption diet of action and drama and intensity and horror and thrillers and now video games. And, you know, you're looking for the next excitement. And so seeing it in real life, and, you know, that's why you had shows like Cops, which just now got canceled because of what's going on. But I think we're feeding into this, and it's not enough. We're wanting more. And that's why it's this vicious cycle. The news is feeding the beast, and we just want more of the stuff that we're criticizing as bad.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. Is like I want to bring in. I guess I want to bring entertainment and enjoyment, not be like I want to still be a legitimate journalist on, you know, action shows, movies, cartoons and stuff, but I don't ever want to feel like I'm going to end up being like this political person where it's like, oh, you defame me, I'm going to sue you. I'm like, dude, I don't even know you. Like, I'm just reading the news, you know? I don't want one of those instances coming down on me like, oh, you said this. I'm like, I'm just reading out of context. I'm just reading in context what I said. You took it out of context. Where like someone could be like saying on the news, reading an actual thing from like a police report, and someone's like, well, he said this, and I'm like, it's just reporting the news.
Yeah, I think the most insidious thing is that these opinion pieces, especially a lot of that on Fox News, are being taken seriously as legitimate news.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be warning labels. You know, I'm all for free speech, but there needs to be warning labels like what Twitter is doing, saying, yeah, well, here are the facts, you know, kind of separating truth from fiction, because we're just losing the war on truth, and it seems to circle back to, you know, the behind the scenes. People want the drama. They don't want the nerdy nitty gritty of how things are made and the details. They want to see the drama of what's going on. They're appealing to emotions rather than, no, this is the fact of what's really happening. As boring as that it sounds, and maybe as unpleasant as it may sound, this is really what's happening. And I feel like we're losing that. And people just seem to care about, you know, this drama.
Yeah. I completely agree. Because, like, there's other stuff I could talk about, but I'm like, is it good to be talking about it while we're still recording, or should we wait till off record? Because there's a lot of philosophical stuff that people freely could debate and talk about. I'm sitting there like, huh.
Don't get me started. I'm just touching like, I could go off on this. Like, I'm very passionate about philosophy and the psychology of human behavior and the politics of everything that's going on. But we'll table that for another discussion.
Yeah, because I feel like if we keep going on, I'd be like, instead of calling this Hero Club interviews, I would be like Michael Hollander shoots on. Like an old school wrestling. You've seen those, right? Like old school wrestling interviews where it's called he shoots, because it's meaning he's just stating what he thinks about someone or other things. Like, that's literally my mentality right there. Is like, man, we could literally do an entire shoot interview. But let's wrapping it up, because like I said, we did slightly sidetrack. But
it was a good sidetrack. It was a good discussion.
I really did enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. I hope our viewers also enjoy it and don't try to like, you know, throw Molotov cocktails at her.
Yeah, it will be fine. I've said worse things on Twitter to get people to be upset.
Oh yeah, you've
stoked
some flames.
I state truths on Twitter that people don't want to accept, and then they come after me, and I just am like, okay, that's why I have a mute button.
Hey, at least it's not like the Judd Lin fans that like don't want to believe me for the fact that Judd Lin was like, I don't think there'll ever be a Power Ranger in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Anyways, moving on from that.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to bring that up. I always have to bring it up somewhere, so at least people
always bring it up somewhere.
Exactly. But... I have to. It's the law of the jungle, man. But what are the actual current products you're working for, and what would you like to promote about like what you do right now, like your current stuff that you're allowed to talk about, obviously?
Yeah. Well, I'm allowed to talk about the company, of course, just not, you know, NDA stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm working on Marvel Strike Force right now, so a lot of cool hand key animated Marvel characters. So nice. A lot of cool action stuff.
All right, so you're working on that. And how can fans contact you? Do you have like a social media or a fan page? Or you just stay off of it because of all the stuff we were just talking about?
Yeah, I pretty much stay away from social media. One, I don't think there's a lot of interest in VR Troopers, and especially my character was such a secondary character. I pursued it for a little bit in the beginning and realized it was just a kind of a brief resurgence because it was the 20-year anniversary. But yeah, I'm not making much Comic-Con appearances, and there doesn't seem to be much interest. And honestly, I'm focused more on what's going on in the news and what's going on politically. I wish I could be an activist and pursue that more. I wish I could be out there protesting. I wish I was just more involved. You know, unfortunately, with the virus and everything going on, I don't think it's a smart thing to go out in large crowds of people, but I would be out there. But yeah, I'm focused now on my career as an animator. The company I work for is great, so I put a lot of time and effort into that. So I do pay attention to what's going on politically, and I wish more people were more actively involved and knowing the truth about what's going on in all areas of our social lives, and not just on Twitter and Facebook.
So you're saying if your trooper transform powers were real, you'd just be laser lance commanding against all this riots and protests right now, just swiping through and striking down people?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it was more like some version of Wonder Woman's lasso of truth. Like, exactly, I just want to lasso the entire country and just get people to be honest, just...
Yeah, because I was telling a friend of mine that... Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going down this path again, but yeah, I just wish there was more civil discussions about what's really going on and people were more honest. That's all.
All right. So there you have it, everyone. After we've done VR Troopers, we talked about video games, we talked about movies, we talked about politics and the film industry and working in it. This has been your interview with Michael Hollander, formerly J.B.Reese of VR Troopers. Thank you again for joining us for this interview and making it almost 2 hours long. Like, I was not expecting you to be so patient with us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It was a great discussion. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. And anyways, now, so quickly for our viewers, you can always check out Hero Club at hero-club.com, and you can follow us across social media at Hero Club for Life. I've been Wheelchair21, and my co-host was Soundout12. We'll see you next time with whatever podcast, interview, or program we have. And thanks again, Mike, and we'll see you all next time.
Okay. Thank you very much. See you guys.